Same reason you'd have a crowbar with Supreme written on it.
Exactly. If you throw the word Supreme on everything, it becomes 5 times more expensive. If a game is going to prioritize exploration as part of its design, does a map marker undermine that quality of the game? I always wondered about that. Like, do they account for the number of creatures multiplying in some way, the encounter level?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Generally speaking, it is harder to deal with groups of enemies than single powerful enemies.
Alex, have you been saving all of your pennies?
I don't have any pennies.
I hear that you can trade them for real money, though. Hey, welcome, everybody, to a show that you actually don't even need pennies to experience. This is Total Pebble Knockdown. I am Nathan.
I am Alex, and I am penniless.
You are penniless, you don't even have penny loafers. First up on the show, we're going to talk about how many pennies you're going to need to save up in order to buy games now.
All the pennies I don't have.
You
Therefore, no new games.
You have no new pennies, and therefore you can't have new games. The target price now for new releases of video games seems to be $70.
Yes, I've noticed this lately, this trend of especially like Electronic Arts and like Square Enix, and then Nintendo's hopping on that too.
Yeah, everybody is pretty much going to the new standard of $70. Which is up from the $60 mark, and, you know, if I look back far enough, not too long actually, maybe 2010 or so, we were at about $50. But it stayed at $50 for a really long time.
Yeah, and I was okay with $50 for a new title, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it was even, if I remember correctly, I think it was even $50 back in, like, N64 era. Like, it was
I don't remember that far.
Yeah, but it had been staying steady for a while now. But yeah, now first release games, it's $70 if you want to buy it out of the gate. That seems to be a pre-purchase price as standard.
Yeah.
And
I'm not a fan.
No, I'm not a fan either. I'm not a fan. Like, I understand that over time things get more expensive, but at the same time, does it? It's going to cost more to actually produce the game, but
Sure.
How much in, like, the physical assets and the distribution do they have to do? Because most of the games that we buy now aren't even in physical form.
Right. If it was a physical thing and I was buying, like, a deluxe edition that came with a fancy box or something like that, I might be able to understand it, but I'm not even getting physical media anymore.
Right, and a lot of people aren't. Like, you pay the same amount. This is always shocking to me, but you pay the same amount if you get the boxed edition as if you get the digital edition. If it's literally just data that's stored on my my hard drive, it costs the same amount as if I got a box with a physical disc and the booklet and everything, and then placed it into my computer, at which point it basically just downloads all the data from the internet now, because most of it's not even on the disc, but it costs the same amount. So maybe just because they need to keep a physical storefront copy for the people who actually still use discs.
Right.
And they
console gamers.
Console gamers, yeah. You can buy the discs for PC. They're just not as common as they used to be.
But the thing is, if you're going to charge $70 for a game, like, it used to be $50, and I think we were okay with $50 back then because there was a lot less competition from third-party or indie devs back in the 2010s.
Sure.
Steam has been around for a while, but, like, the indie scene wasn't nearly as big as it is now. And now these AAA companies are charging $70 for what actually amounts to being subpar gaming. I know Forspoken right now, it's a bit contentious in a lot of news, because it's just underwhelming, apparently. It's just not great.
Well, it's something that we've kind of discussed on the show before, that I've seen plenty of media about, but I want to say it was a Nasu video that I watched not too long ago, which was the state of perpetually unfinished games. That the idea is that once upon a time, back in the day, as we all know, you would get a physical copy of a game, and when you got the physical copy of the game, it had to be a completed game.
Mm-hmm.
Because there wasn't like a day one patch. They couldn't have a roadmap of content. It wasn't even attached to the internet. They sold you the game, and that game was in its final form. It had to be.
Right.
So they would play test it, they would put everything that they needed to on there. There wasn't any add-ons or anything like that. They had to give you a finished product. In the modern era, though, there's this idea of good enough to ship.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I'm gonna give you enough so that you know that a game exists on here, with the promise that eventually it will be everything that we wanted it to be, but no guarantee of it.
And there have been some pretty decent games that have come out and like delivered on
those promises.
The promises. Again, an example that everyone throws out is usually No Man's Sky. Came out kind of in a really rough spot, but over the last like 6 years, they have added to it and continued to expand upon it, all for free, mind you.
Yes.
It just made it a much better game, and like a lot of it, what they wanted to do is now a thing that exists in the game.
Right. And Cyberpunk is usually the other one that they refer to, because when that came out, it was a buggy, glitchy mess.
Yeah, but Cyberpunk already has a DLC that you're gonna have to pay for that they're coming out with, and, you know, they could work on finishing the game first.
Yeah, there is this drive to find out ways to further monetize your game as quickly as possible, get it to a finished enough state where you can start paying for it. Unfortunately, though, that is not always the case. There's been plenty of games that have all but been abandoned by their companies before they're even done. One of the ones that I am always reminded of is a little game called Anthem. You probably remember that from a ways back. There was basically a roadmap of content for them from BioWare. They kept talking about like the Storm or the Tempest or whatever that was coming out, and it came and it was just pathetically sad.
Yeah.
And it kind of led to the downfall of any further content reveals. And then if it's an online game where they need to support it and they decide that they're just going to turn the servers off, you might not be able to play it at all, which is pretty annoying. But I think the other thing, and one of the reasons why games had actually stayed at like the $50 mark for as long as they did, was because ultimately you're probably not paying $50. You're probably paying closer to $100 when all is said and done. Because now you gotta get the DLC, and you have the skins, or you have the extra currency, you have the microtransactions.
Yeah, and I think one of the things they're doing with that now is they're going, hey, we're going to charge $70, but there aren't going to be any microtransactions in there.
Sure, I buy that. I don't see that happening, though. I think it's going to be $70, and it's going to be the same microtransactions. If they can do loot boxes, they'll figure out how to do loot boxes, and they'll be paid DLC.
Absolutely.
I don't see them getting away from that.
I feel like loot boxes aren't as much a thing as they were a couple years ago anymore.
And I think that that's mostly from the public pushback on it. It's definitely not because it wasn't profitable.
No, it's because parents are mad.
Yeah, and I think it started to open them up to some, not just bad PR, but for some legal action in some cases.
I think instead of the loot box type of model, generally speaking, games go with the cosmetic stuff, like League of Legends, which makes all its money via skins.
One of the most profitable games there is Fortnite. And Fortnite is free. The reason why they make any money at all is because of the Battle Pass, and everything that you get in Battle Pass is cosmetics. If people are trying to figure out why would you pay for cosmetics in a free game, I'm telling you right now, the reason is status.
Same reason you'd have a crowbar with Supreme written on it.
Exactly. If you throw the word Supreme on everything, it becomes 5 times more expensive. It's brand recognition, it's status symbols, it's there to impress other people. So if I come in and I have a cape and a tomato head, other players in Fortnite might think I am cool. That's it. And that's worth a lot of money, apparently. That's a good market to be in. There's a lot of free games right now that are making buco bucks.
Oh, yeah.
Big time. But the AAA titles, they still want to, have an upfront cost. And that's fine if they want to deliver an actual experience. That's more than what a free-to-play offering is. If they want to do that, that's great. But if it's going to be the $70, and then you still have all the other stuff that's on top of it, then we've just raised the initial buy-in for a title that's going to still cost inordinate amounts of money.
Yeah. And I can tell you right now, I'm not buying a game that costs $70.
I cannot think of many titles that would come out where I would just pay that out of the gate. In the modern landscape, too, maybe this is the ray of hope that everyone can take away, is that, luckily, the AAA market is not the only market for games anymore.
Yeah.
The big guys are facing competition from smaller game studios, smaller dev houses, smaller publishing houses that are able to make interesting games that are maybe smaller games, but are significantly less expensive even at starting prices. We're talking maybe $20 or $30, that are going to provide quite a bit of bang for your buck, while also supporting smaller developers.
Yeah.
So, and those are readily available.
On a side note, even if a game that costs $70 is half off, you're still paying almost that $50 cost.
You certainly are.
You're paying that $35.
They do like the sales of the Ultimate Edition of those AAA games, and so it's like, oh yeah, it's like 65% off if you get the Ultimate Edition of like Assassin's Creed Ragnarok or Valhalla. It's got Ragnarok, it's got the Druids and everything. I saw that recently and it was like 65% off. It's still like $50.
Yeah.
Because to get all of the additional content in the deluxe edition and everything is normally like $120 or $130. Fun fact though, I actually did buy Valhalla, but I just bought like the Ragnarok edition, so it's the base game and the Ragnarok expansion, and it was $15. And it's like, okay, that's fine. I'm not gonna buy all the other stuff for twice the price or whatever. $70, I think it's unnecessary, frankly. I understand that developers need to get paid. I wish that they would do better paying their actual designers and coders and people that work for them, and that it wasn't just going to the CEOs. Not that I would ever accuse any game companies of doing that, but knowing how much they monetize after the fact, and all of the additional content that they're going to make that they're going to want to get paid for as well, it seems unnecessary to raise that rate. Especially, like I mentioned earlier, that so much of it doesn't even need distribution or store shelving, shelf space now, because you'll get most of your sales digitally. What kind of game would have to get released for you to be willing to pay that out of the gate? Just your fantasy game, the pie-in-the-sky dream game that you'd be willing to pay that kind of money for.
Right.
I want to know what that is. I can't make it happen, but I'd be interested what it is. So Alex, have you ever been playing around in a game and you get onto the main map and it just gives you all of these different places that you might be able to go?
Okay, so you're talking about the Ubisoft method of here's all the places you can do things at, good luck.
Yes, exactly. That thing. You've been there, right?
Okay, I've been to all of them.
You've been to all of them. So what you'll usually encounter, especially in open world games, is being able to actually like set down a marker so that you know where to go. And it got me to thinking about something. about really 2 games in particular from the same series, which we've talked about on occasion, but I think it's an interesting compare and contrast. And that's Elder Scrolls and
Yes.
Morrowind and Skyrim. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Two of, arguably 2 of the most beloved parts of the franchise. Like those games resonate with people today. But one of the big things that is different between them is your ability to put a marker on the map and then follow it to your destination.
Mm-hmm.
And I started thinking about whether this is a good thing or if it's a bad thing. And I'll make kind of the opening arguments for both of these so that you know what we're talking about.
Good.
On the good side, on the positive side, it's pretty straightforward. Being able to actually have a direction of where you're going. Maybe they put down like a little thing of fairy dust or something like they did in Fable so that you can track your location. In terms of user interface and the convenience of the player, it can lead to a better player experience so that you don't get lost. However, the opposite side of this, the bad part, is that if I just put map markers down, I'm really just interacting with the user interface itself, the UI, the framework, and I'm just following it from point A to point B. I'm not necessarily experiencing the world itself and the depth therein. Like, if you think about Skyrim, it's great. You can put down multiple map markers. You can follow all of them at the same time. You can put a marker down at all the different holds if you wanted to. If you wanted to,
you
point
can put
to them.
a single map marker down and then have a quest marker in Skyrim. You can't put multiple map markers down.
But you can have multiple quest markers. You can have side quest markers and all of that. You can put those all down at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In Morrowind, you don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
You have a journal that has these long lists of text that explain to you what you're supposed to do, and you have actual signs in the world that will lead you to those destinations. So if you want to find a cave, you can't just look at a map and say, I put a marker down and that's where I think I want to go, or follow a quest line and have it tell you where to go. You have to go out into the world, and you have to follow instructions and what people have said and the signs and everything, and you have to pay attention to the world to get to that location.
Mm-hmm.
So, the big question here, is it good or bad that we have markers in games?
Well, let me flip this on its head for you, Nathan. You've been around for a little while now.
Longer than I like.
Yeah. Do you remember back in the olden times when we had to write down directions on how to get from point A to point B?
Oh, it's been so long. It's been so long that I've had to do that, but
yeah. And I mean, before our time, you had to use an actual map.
Yeah, you might have had to use an actual map. You remember back in the day when they had the cartridges and everything, and some games would actually come with a physical map of the game world?
Yeah, I still get those once in a while. Or not anymore, but I've gotten a few.
Right.
But alright, so in the car, you used to have to, back in the olden times, you'd have to pull up an actual physical giant road map.
Right. Right.
And then I think when we were a bit younger, it was you could go online and look at the directions to get there and either print it out, get printed out directions, or you could write them down and then you'd have to follow those on paper. So you'd have your person in the passenger seat navigating for you, telling you, make a right turn here.
Yep.
But nowadays, we don't even need to buy a GPS. Our phones are just equipped with them.
Oh, yeah. You just pull up whatever map app you want, and you go to town. Throw it...
So let me flip this on its head for you in that case. Do you think it's good or bad that you no longer have to pull up a road map to find where you want to go?
I mean, from a practical standpoint, obviously, no.
Yeah.
Like being able to, just have the little device tell you this is where you're at and this is where you're headed is
Mhm.
obviously going to be more convenient.
Yes.
But I do ask, if you're on like a road trip or you're like going somewhere, do you lose something in the experience? Like, am I spending so much time looking at my phone at the map marker in the real world that I'm not actually absorbing the world around me? It's sort of like the same thing between the Skyrim and the Morrowind, that you're not really experiencing the world, you're just getting to where the marker is.
I think you have to come at it from a standpoint of how much time investment you have.
Sure.
Because in our busy modern lives, where we don't have time to pull up a roadmap and do that, even though you could still pull up a roadmap and go to town. But like,
Oh, they sell them.
say
Yeah.
you, say you've got a meeting for
Mhm.
work and it's at this place you've never been.
Yeah.
Do you want to pull up a roadmap?
No.
Do you want to pull up GPS?
Yes.
Yeah, that's 100% more convenient. It becomes a matter of how much investment you can give into that world or this thing, where do I need to get there quick and efficiently, or do I have time to wander around and meander and find my way there and find all the experiences along the way?
Right.
I think that translates to gaming in that, do we have as much time as adults with our busy work lives and social lives and whatnot, where we can devote time to doing things that are just exploring in a game instead of finding a way to do something and get quests done, for instance.
Okay. Well then I'm gonna flip this on its head one more time for you.
It's just flipping around all
We're,
over the place.
we're flipping the flipping. If a game is going to prioritize exploration as part of its design, does a map marker undermine that quality of the game?
I feel like if the game is specifically exploration focused,
Mm-hmm.
then more or less a map marker might not be useful unless that's the only tool you get. Because in the case of Elite Dangerous, I can set down a map marker. I can set a waypoint on anywhere in the galaxy I want to go, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to divert from that along the way.
Recently I was playing a game called Chernobylite, and in that game, I believe you can pull up a map, you can put down map markers and everything like that, but it has this other interesting mechanic in it to try and define its game world. You have a rad detector. There's a lot of excess radiation. It's at a time period where that is still the case. And of course it's science fiction. But the map itself allows you to see where you might not be able to go. The map markers will not necessarily diverge you around it. However, if you were to pay attention to the signs, and if you were to be holding your rad detector, you might start to realize that there is danger on the horizon. That if I venture too close to the border, all of a sudden, the rad detector just starts to spike and go from white to yellow to red to oh my god, please stop. And then that you're going to start taking health damage. But the game world itself will also inform you a little bit by giving you hazard signs around certain areas of the map, which technically you can wander into, and it's not like anyone will necessarily stop you, but those are hotbeds of radiation, and so it's trying to give you a very real in-game way of seeing that there is something to avoid. I think the reason why it does that is because if you were to look at its user interface, it tries to be fairly minimalistic in how it's presenting itself. I had seen something very similar to that in Metro Exodus when I played that, is that pretty much the map itself, when you're in the game, there isn't really an interface, so to speak, around you. There's no overlay. Any information that you have is pretty much in-game. If you're looking for the time or data, it's on your watch. If you're looking for your ammo count, it's on the gun itself. And so you don't have these like little mini maps in the corner and map markers all over the place that is going to take you out of the immersion of the experience and the idea that you are indeed trying to explore this world, that is the focal point of it. So I've seen it done where they can help you essentially navigate the world and even get to your objectives while minimizing the pretty straightforward marker that you can set down. And I think it's very good when they try to do that in a creative way, to try and keep giving you direction while being immersive so that you don't get lost, but also that you don't find things immediately, that you actually have to, think about the world a little bit and kind of get out of your comfort zone instead of just following the shiny point. Do you have an example of a game that did navigation points like that well?
I mean, I played Assassin's Creed, but that's got tons of map markers on it.
It's every map marker. When you can pull up your bird, and your bird is just like soaring over the top, there are like giant lights in the sky of silver and gold that just resonate all over the map, and it's like it hits you like a freight train. Like it's just everything is highlighted at the same time. There is a danger too with highlighting so much, because then it's just like a sea of lights. It has little context to it. Well, then I guess I'll just ask you, if you had to choose between having a marker to follow or to not have a marker to follow in a game, what would you prefer?
I'd rather have a marker I can choose to follow.
The option.
I like the option being there rather than no option.
Yeah, that's fair. If you can make it optional, but I don't necessarily have to have it on, I'm good with that. I am familiar with like what you were talking about in Morrowind, and even old school World of Warcraft used to have that too, where you had to read the entire quest description and figure out where the heck you were going. Right.
Yeah. Which is fine if you've got the time to devote to deciphering a quest.
Yeah. The one other thing that I would say is that if you're going to implement quest markers and the like, I would really appreciate it if I could have multiple quest markers. The only reason I say that is because there is a certain break in flow if I have to go and start choosing which quest I want to follow in some list, which I've had to do in many, many games. I would pass the question on to all of you. Do you like to have map markers, and would you prefer to have them in the game? More importantly than that, though, I'm looking for suggestions of how games have done a unique job of guiding your character from point A to point B.
On-rails chase scene.
Yeah, just make a game that's a tunnel.
The English Chunnel.
The English Chunnel. The game.
The game.
Great. Love
ChunnelQuest 2023.
ChunnelQuest 2023.
Yeah.
Well, there's the episode title. Great. So, Alex, I have been continuing my attempt of playing every Souls-like imaginable badly, and in that quest, I stumbled upon Hellpoint. Things were going okay until I reached a certain trope that video games often pull out, which drove me nuts. Do you know what it was?
Souls-likes.
Well, I mean, it is a Souls-like, so obviously that was the first warning sign. But no! So it introduced one of those dual boss battles.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was that Smough and the other dude kind of thing from Dark Souls, but it was the Ascended Attendants, I want to say they were. And the way that this boss battle is supposed to be implemented is that you can get into it from several different angles, but it's this relatively small arena. There's a couple, like, raised blocks that you theoretically could hide behind if the hit detection didn't just pass through them entirely. And you have these two enemies that have a shared health bar. One of them has this big staff weapon and will, like, shoot off projectiles at you that just will, like, kill you in 3 shots. And then there's another one that has, like, this mystical chain, and it will, like, run at you and try to smack you with it in a combination as many times as possible. So you have the one that tries more long-range weapons, and then you have the one that tries more melee weapons.
Okay.
But they both have magical powers, and they'll both fire stuff at you continuously, and they will probably kill you off very quickly.
Good.
Yeah. This is not the first time that I have had to deal with a dual boss battle, but it probably was the most frustrating. And it got me to thinking why these are so damn annoying.
Because you have to juggle 2 powerful enemies in one arena.
Exactly. This is where the big challenge comes when a game presents you with it.
I remember Devil May Cry 3 had Agni and Rudra.
Oh, yeah.
Which were 2 headless giant-looking things, each wielding a sword. One of wind and one of fire.
Oh, well, that's fun.
Yes, and Agni and Rudra were actually the swords. And once you defeated the bosses, you got to keep the swords, and they were talking swords, and Dante told them to stop talking.
What I think is interesting is that, in similar fashion to that boss battle, when they do the dual boss battles, either the bosses will have some kind of, like, relationship to each other, like it's always famous that they'll be, like, twins or something, or they worked together, and they're friends from work, or whatever. But they're usually... They also have 2 kind of, like, different skill sets. And because they have 2 different skill sets, you have to try and deal with 2 different styles of fighting at the same time as well. Which is always annoying. Either one is fast and one just hits hard, or one just has a lot of life and the other one is a glass cannon. Whatever it happens to be, you have to now think at the same time about 2 different strategies to deal with 2 different enemies. And it's incredibly, incredibly annoying. But it got me to thinking about how you might, because we're sadistic, like how you would implement this if we were doing, like, a campaign, like a role-playing campaign. Obviously, you have a party. Your party is already essentially for the monsters in the world a dual boss battle, but there's like 5 of you. But you can set up something similar for your...
that's just a multiple creature encounter.
Yeah, a multiple creature encounter, but, like, if we did that for, like, the end bosses, like the big bosses at the end, but we have 2 of them. That would be pretty cool.
I mean, that's pretty standard, though, for, like, role-playing, for tabletop. Yeah. I mean, maybe not necessarily having one big bad guy, but multiple encounter type.
Oh, okay.
You know, like, oh, maybe you've got a really good frontline warrior and then a spellcaster, but the difference there is that you're still outnumbering, in that case, the boss. 5 to 1.
I think to myself about an encounter I had in one campaign where there were a lot of different kinds of enemies that were on there. There were orcs, and there were wolves, and there was one fell dragon. And the fell dragon was obviously the set piece. That's the big main campaign. But what if We just didn't have the orcs, and we didn't have anything like that, but we had the 2 fell dragons. And they're...
They need to be smaller fell dragons.
No, they don't. They'll be the
Yes.
same size.
No.
Why?
Okay, so how encounter levels work in, like, D&D
Yeah.
is that if you want to have an encounter that's, like, not just overpowered, they have to be multiple, but, like, smaller challenge rating.
Okay.
So if you
Okay.
have 2 encounter level, like, CR9 fell dragons,
Yeah.
that equates to something much more powerful than, like, a CR9. Becomes, like, a CR14.
Oh.
Like, encounter level.
Oh, okay.
But if you have, like, a CR9 fell dragon and then, like, 5 or 6 orcs, it's a different encounter level too.
Oh, okay. I always wondered about that. Like, do they account for the number of creatures multiplying in some way, the encounter level?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Generally speaking, it is harder to deal with groups of enemies than single powerful enemies.
Oh, I always knew that. Like, there was a rule that if you wanted to make your party feel powerful, give them 1 powerful enemy to fight. If you wanted to make them feel vulnerable, give them a lot of very weak enemies to fight. Because it's the number of attacks that everybody can do.
Yeah, but
that
adding
ends up
2
mattering.
very powerful monsters is still a little bit overkill.
Right, right. Although, I will say this. If you do give your party a ton of small monsters to fight, and any one of them knows the sleep spell, they're not actually fighting that many monsters. I think that the main key, though, is that if you're going to have, like, 2 monsters and something, I'd really like them to have a good lore, like an interaction between the 2 of them. Like, either you have brothers or you have rivals. Like, if I'm fighting 2 dragons, I want the 2 of them to have, like, a history, a relationship to each other. They don't just happen to be in the same place. They like, know each other.
Right.
Yet, like, one of them is angry at the other one because they keep moving the coffee maker. Like, I need them to have backstory for these 2 creatures. And that will actually just add to the fun of, like, who are you even targeting first? I go into a room and there's 2 ogres there, and one has a club and one has a mace, and they're sitting there arguing about, like, you know, the real ogres of Hollywood that they watched last night, and you know, which one of the real ogres do they like the most, that keeps it real. And then you walk in on them and you have to fight them because they're, you know, still ogres that are, you know, keeping you from your destination. But now I gotta actually start thinking about this. Like, can I turn them against each other? Can I get in on this conversation? Is this like one of those I always lie and I always tell the truth scenarios where now I have to
lie?
Yeah, exactly. I am going to have to figure this out. The upshot is I stopped playing Hellpoint after that.
There you go.
If anyone out there has encountered dual monsters in the game, please let me know. What kind of relationship do you want your twin monsters to have? Is it contentious? Is it funny? Are you just going to try to have them fight each other? So this has been yet another episode of a show that we do called Total Pebble Knockdown. Alex, if folks out there were interested in finding all the episodes of the show, where could they go?
If you are interested in finding more episodes of the show or anything else we've got going on, please head over to totalpebbleknockdown.com.
And when you are over there, you can see all of the wonderful products that we have, all of the catalog of Total Pebble Knockdown. I will give you a little bit of a plug that the Titanium Mine, every game that I played from best to worst from 2022, should now be up there. It is almost an hour long. There's 31 entries on there, and as I think back on it, I think I still forgot some. There's a lot to keep track of. I'm sorry, but it is both in audio and video form, and I'm going to actually try to, when I do those episodes from here on out, do a video version of them as well that will go up on the Titanium Mind channel.
There you go.
People will watch live, because I think they like to watch the videos where it's all put into context. So feel free to click on our Patreon link when you are over there, because we will have the Titanium Minds and the Total Pebble Knockdowns will all go up there early, and you will be able to get the additional content that we usually cut out of the show. And don't forget to subscribe to us on podcasts, and like, and review if you are on one of those. And you can also catch us on various social media networks. I am at Titanium.
I'm at EXP Limited, and our show is at Pebble Knockdown.
That's right, for all of your pebbly needs. And Alex, if we're not doing pennies, does it mean that you have nickels?
Does it mean I'm dimed?
You're dimed.
I'm dying to be dimed.
I actually heard that it costs more to make pennies and nickels than a penny or a nickel. Like, it costs more.
Pennies are worthless.
Pennies are worthless. They're worth negative money.
That being said, if you collect them and you make the bank give you real money for it, you've won.
It's a long con, but it works. Thank you, everybody, for watching the Financial Times, known as Total Pebble Knockdown. And we will see you on the next episode. Bye for now.
Bye!